What's up, guys? Chilling on the Clearwater beach. So I wanted to do a video. I think this is super important because a lot of us think that to get ahead that we need to say yes to a lot of things. Okay, you need to say yes to the right people. You need to say yes to the right opportunities. You need to say yes to the right marketing strategy or yes to the right insert whatever. A big shift for me today, and we were talking about it in the mastermind, is actually that success comes to those who are willing to say no to things. And your success or your failure in life, in business, oftentimes is going to be coming down to what you say no to. Because you know this deep down. There's only 24 hours in a day, right? You can't get more of it. That's your most valuable asset. So you got to protect that. So how do you know that you're saying yes to the right things? It's simple. You say no to probably 95% of stuff out there, the unimportant, so you can say yes and focus on what really matters. So in this video, I'm going over 6 things that I started saying no to that had a big impact in my life and in my business. All right, so the first one. This is less about a thing I actually said no to and more about a mindset. This comes from Derek Sivers. It's that if something is not a hell yes, okay, like where you're jumping off the walls, you're jumping off the rails to do it, then it becomes a hell no. This weeds out all the opportunities that might be good, they might not. You might have one foot in, you might have one foot out, and all that stuff. You see, most people, they go through life and they collect a lot of maybes, why not, I'm sure's, and they wonder why they're stressed out, they don't have any time, and they end up going on that path for 5-6 years, and they're like, how the hell did I get here? It feels like I lost control of what I really wanted to do, or I lost the path somewhere along the way. So for me, I've made a commitment now, and I'm still with you on this. Like, this is hard for me too. But my commitment now is that if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. One of the things that's an absolute hell yes, but doesn't necessarily fit into this business is touring in a band. So a lot of you know I tour professionally for 6 months out of the year normally in a rock and roll band. Now that is a hell yes for me, even though it does not fit into filming content, even though it is much harder on the road to actually film stuff and to run a business from the back of a tour bus. It just is. Logistically, it's brutal, it's tough. My revenue tanks. But it's such a hell yes because it's aligned with what 14-year-old Clark wanted. 14-year-old Clark would have kicked my ass if I turned down that opportunity. Okay, getting up on stage, no matter how much money you make ever in life, guys, you can't buy your way into that opportunity. You can't buy your way onto a rock star stage. You know, I don't care if you're a billionaire. To me, that is so crystal clear that that is a hell yes, and that's why I keep doing it. You see how that works? Now, the next 5 are going to be examples of that, things I started saying no to, but I just wanted to leave you with that framework of hell yes or no, because if you apply that, if you take away one thing from this video, hell yes or no, be really, really excited about the stuff you say yes to. Because think about it, aren't you going to do a better job if you're stoked on it? Hell yes. Aren't you going to have more passion? Yes. Isn't it going to feel like less effort and less work if it's a hell yes? Of course. So not only are you going to be better, people are going to love you more. It's going to be more streamlined if you're just really freaking excited about what you say yes to. The one thing I started saying no to a lot of is probably what you suffer with too, and that is the new idea fairy. Okay, so we were talking in the mastermind group. Look, entrepreneurs, we're messed up. We're crazy. You watching this right now. We're not the norm, okay? And so a lot of times you get successful because you have good ideas. And so you start pursuing these ideas and you're a visionary and you're someone who can put things together, make it work. You're a creative person and that's the fun thing for you. But what happens? Okay, something starts getting bigger and bigger and then it stops becoming entertaining or new or novel. And so you get this new idea for something else and you're like, oh my God, this is it. And all this passion comes running back to you. Heck, I mean, even apply this to relationships, right? After you've been dating someone for a while, when you start finding the unglamorous side of relationships, like the hair around the sink or, you know, they don't flush the toilet or whatever, like mundane example you want to use in a long-term relationship, it stops being as sexy as it once was. That's just the reality of it. Doesn't mean you don't love them. So the new idea fairy is always going to be there, guys. It's always going to be there no matter what you do. So I started learning to say no to new ideas. For an example, everyone's talking about, oh, well, if you do YouTube videos or you build a business, you should have a merch company. You should have clothing. Do people really want Refusing to Settle clothing? Like, maybe, but is that the thing that's going to move the needle? Absolutely not. Content's what's going to move the needle. So maybe one day I'll do it. Maybe, it'd be nice to have some cool little clothing merch or whatever, but like, that's not the thing that's going to move the needle. So it's a no. Another example, coaching. Courses. I could do a Facebook membership group where I have, memberships of people who pay to get in a group. That's a good idea, but it's not the thing that's going to move the needle. You got to go 80-20 on this. So one thing I've started doing, the coaches were recommending, is create a product backlog. All right. So you take all your good ideas that the idea fairy brings you, and if you don't have the power to execute on them, if they're not going to build you up, they're not going to move your business, write them in a backlog so you can always come back to them later if it's really, really something you want to do down the road. The third thing I stopped is podcast interviews, PR. Guys, a lot of times it's a waste of time, just to be blunt. And this is weird because I started as a podcaster. That was my first freelance gig. I was interviewing New York Times bestselling authors and researchers and health people over Skype. So I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the interviewed side and I've been on the interviewing side. Now I have compassion for people who are doing podcast shows, right? Because that's a brutal grind. But for me, it's just taken up too much time in the past, and the return just really isn't there to justify that. Because it's not just, people, they'll reach out to you and they'll say, hey, Brian, can I pick your brain for 30 minutes on this podcast? And for them, it might be 30 minutes. But for you, you have to schedule that in your week. You have to block everything out. You have to make sure you're home. You have to make sure your audio is good. How much time is that taking? 30 minutes each side. So that's an hour and a half that you just committed to, maybe even 2 hours. Now, how many people are going to hear that? Well, maybe, 100, 200 if they're just starting out. So the time's much better spent in 2 hours, maybe creating videos, taking a walk on a beach like this, or just doing things that move the needle. You hear me saying that a lot this year. So podcasts, saying no to those. Interviews, saying no to those. Unless it's in person, I'm not going to do it. Okay, the fourth thing. This is drinking alcohol unless there's a specific reason to celebrate. You'll hear me drinking. I'm going to sit down for this one. Grab a drink. We're sitting down for this one. I know recently I've been talking a lot more about drinking and alcohol. That's because I think it's something that most everybody does and not a lot of people talk about. Now, I've never had like a serious drinking problem, although I've used it to unwind in the past. And, I like drinking. I like partying. It's one of my favorite things. And just having a good time. But without a reason to celebrate, I'm stopping drinking just pretty much for no good reason. That is for a couple reasons, but the main one is the brain fog. When you go out and drink, it can ruin your next day if you have 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever drinks. It really does affect your next day. But I've found something bigger. It affects my next 2 days. Because now all of a sudden that next day's shot, okay, so where you just sit around, you're lazy, you play Fortnite all day and you recover, you listen to podcasts or watch YouTube. But then it also affects the following day because you're making up for all that work and you're still in a haze from that one day. Not even a day, probably 5 hours. Kills 2 days of intense productivity. So I've just had to say no, unless it's a reason to celebrate, unless there's a good reason, unless it's worth 2 days, saying no to that. As of right now, that is. And I'm on the health kick too, which that's one thing I've said no to that's made my energy levels more consistent and my health a lot better. The fifth point. This is criticizing, gossiping, and complaining. You could throw blaming in there too. Most people, if you realize this, it's really shocking that most people are addicted to gossip. Gossip actually has evolved with us as humans. I was listening to a psychologist way smarter than me talk about this, and he was saying that gossip when we were back in small tribes was actually how we found out who was who. Found out who was doing what, who was maybe sleeping with who was a provider, who was slacking, so we would gossip. But now, when we have 7 point whatever billion people on the planet, the gossip never ends. Versus back then, it was only 150 people in your tribe, but now we got 7 billion people. And you just see this with tabloid magazines or people that get really, really excited about, gossiping or something like that. You can see it in people's eyes, like an energy rush that goes over them when you start talking about it. And look, it can be fun. It can be exciting. But let me ask you a question. How do you feel when you walk away from a conversation and you're gossiping? Or you're talking shit, or you're being negative, or you're complaining? It's that temporary release in the moment, but don't you walk away feeling like, oh, kind of dirty or kind of bad about yourself? And then think about a conversation you have of where like you and a buddy are sitting down, you're like figuring out life, BSing back and forth ideas about goals or settings or dreams, or maybe even some of these videos, or you're engaging with that kind of content. That energy you feel after those kinds of conversations, completely different from the lack of energy you feel from the negative conversations. So the thing I started saying no to: gossiping, criticizing, blaming, complaining. And look, there's good reasons to complain. There's good reasons to blame. There's good reasons for all those. But what it does is it always strips you of your power. It makes you the victim, not the victor. And I think that the less power you have mentally, like the less power you feel you have, because it's perceived power as well, the less likely you are to take action and make changes in life towards what you want. And the more likely you are to settle, and the less likely you are to refuse to settle. Name drop. The last thing, this is more practical, but it's no to $10 an hour tasks. I got some good advice in the mastermind. They're like, look, guys, a lot of you right now, you're making 6 figures, 7 figures, some guys in the room, 8 figures, really, really high performers, but you're still doing these $10 an hour tasks. How are you going to get to the next level if you're still doing $10 an hour tasks? That's very, very hard. So I was like, these guys are right. Even though you're good at it, even though you frame it as you're saving money, that's a lie. Okay, those are 2 big lies that you can get caught up in if you're trying to build a business or you're trying to do anything online, is that you can do it the best and that it would take too much time to train someone, so you might as well do it yourself, right? That cliche. If you want something done right, you do it yourself. Garbage. Or that you're saving money by doing that thing, by not outsourcing it, by not hiring someone. It's the complete opposite. Because once you realize how unimportant you are with like a majority of things and how dispensable we are, it frees us up to do the things that really matter, and the things you can outsource, ironically, are the things that make the most money and move the needle, like filming videos, like creative high-level thinking, like making products. And actually, you're burning money, because if you take someone who, let's just say they make $100,000 a year for working hours, I think that comes out to about $53 an hour, somewhere around there. All of a sudden, if a task takes you 2 hours, that's a $100 task, and you could outsource it for 20. So do you see there how you're like losing 80 bucks? Going on this goes for like outsourcing things that you don't enjoy, things that you can outsource and you have the funds to do. So if you have the chance between, taking an Uber Pool and an Uber X, well, if the Uber X is $10 more and it says you're going to save 30 minutes to an hour, of course, take the Uber X. For me, it's like, look, I started getting this meal delivery service that's $10 a meal, but it saves me the cleaning, the prepping, the figuring it all out, the weighing, the measuring the calories, all that stuff, and it's delivered. All I have to do is pop it in the microwave. Now, is it the healthiest? No. Is it the most convenient? Of course. So I'm going for that, and it's working. What are the $10 an hour tasks you're currently doing, and how can you outsource or automate them? All right, there you go, guys. Those are the 6 things I started saying no to that made my life a lot better. Some random, some high level, but some deep stuff in there. Remember the hell yes or no. So my question to you right now, if you're watching this towards the end, congratulations, you made it all the way. What are the things that you're doing that you need to say no to? Okay, what are the things in your life that you're stressing about that you just need to cut out? Maybe people, maybe events, maybe commitments, maybe scheduling, maybe entertainment. Things that aren't moving you forward are actually moving you back and holding you back. That's a super big takeaway I learned this year, and stuff I'm really trying to hone in on. So what is that for you? Spend some time, answer it in a journal, write it down, talk about it with a friend, post it in the comments below. Please like this video right now if you're watching this. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you're not already. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Be sure you're following on Instagram. I'm posting a ton of behind-the-scenes stuff you're missing out on, and engaging with you guys if you're not following there already. Trying to make that really personal, real, raw, daily over there on Instagram. Love each and every one of you. Until next time, stop settling, start living. See you guys.